Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kevin Savage, and today we're going to look at the #1 reverb of 2020. So let's hop into Ableton and check it out. All right, so we are in Ableton, and let's take a look at this reverb, that what I think is one of the best free reverb plugins of 2020, and it is a reverb plugin by the company Valhalla, which many of you have probably heard of. Valhalla released the, they're the ones behind Valhalla Room, Valhalla Vintage, Valhalla Shimmer, and a number of other Valhalla reverbs. Typically, it's hard to find a really good sounding free reverb, or there might be some good ones, but their GUI might look like trash. So it's always nice when there is a free reverb that comes out that not only sounds good and is interesting, but is also nice and easy in the eyes. I think the last time I got a free reverb that I was really happy with, it was ROM by Native Instruments, which I have here. This is ROM by Native Instruments. I'll show you a little bit about this a little bit later. Typically, when it comes to reverb for me, it's all about, if I'm looking for a mix reverb, I want something simple, easy. I want to be able to adjust the decay, not really have to think a lot about it, just really basic for mixing. When it comes to sound design, which I think that this reverb is a little bit better for, I want something that's going to give me unique characteristics. That's why I have snare, crash, and then a piano on here, specifically because I use a lot of reverb for when I reverse things, or if I want, for transitions and such, right? Vocals to transition into a vocal, or from an intro to a verse. Reverse snare risers, reverse crash risers, this kind of like noise sound. So I have this choppy like snare right here, this little trappy snare, right? And what I would typically do is I would use this on like an intro. I would put a reverb on. A lot of the times I would take something like I would take the stock plugins, which I'm a big fan of, and make and really, and then I'd freeze it. Let's do this, freeze it, and then I would create another audio track, and I'd basically copy this over and then reverse it. And so you'd get this. Right, and I do the same thing, same sort of structure when it comes to my crashes, right? I got this like crash right here. I would do the same thing. I would put, or claps too. I would put, a reverb on here, or make the really long decay, freeze it, flatten it, reverse it, and then I would use that to transition between sections on a track. So that's a big reason why I use reverb. Now, Valhalla released their Supermassive is unique. It does not function the same as like a normal reverb, right? Right here, we've got we got a filter, we got a pre-delay, we've got a shape. We got this like reflections here, a global quality. This is not always in every single one, but this just allows you to have like eco, super low CPU usage, or higher CPU. Decay time. The big things I find myself messing around with is like input processing and decay time, and then dry wet. But if we look at Valhalla, we're like, whoa, this is different. We've got mix, we've got width, we got width is kind of, I guess, we have that here in like size, kind of. I mean, this is more of like stereo. Is it like really wide, or is it really tight, like mono? We have delay, which we don't typically see on a normal reverb plugin like this. We have feedback that you can occasionally see if you look at ROM. ROM has some similarities to this, right? We look here, we got some feedback, but this is definitely different. There's no pre-delay on this, right? We have modulation and then some EQ. So this is kind of like the input processing right here, this kind of says like, what, you know, how do we want to trim the sound? And then we have modes. This is a big thing. Valhalla does a lot of modes. It's their, like, the way that it algorithmically processes. It's similar to the modes we see over here, right? Airy, cosmic, grounded, right? It's just different types of sounds. It's kind of like changing between like room types in some of their other plugins. But each one of these like have their own type of benefits, right? Like Hydra, Gemini, right? And what I learned when I was playing around with this last night is these modes, kind of the most important things that I noticed were mode, delay, warp, and feedback, and kind of an obviously mix. And this kind of determines the sound. So I was playing around with mode, decay, delay, and warp, and it kind of came up with this reverb. So check this out. Oh. All right, it's like a really kind of like gritty, kind of crunchy sound, right? If we remove it, right? So, but what I found to be the easiest way to kind of figure out this, and this is kind of the way that I approach a lot of VSTs, is by going through like a preset and then seeing how they create something. So if we look at like small verbs, that was how I figured this out, because when I first got this, if you just kind of play with like a more initialized version, you know, you're like, what is this doing? So like, what is warp doing? It says what it's doing here, but it could be a little tricky. So, you know, like that's super delay-y. But then what about warp? So what if we pull this down? You've kind of got this hybrid where warp goes between delay and then kind of switching it over into kind of the reverb sound. But then it comes like a really tight reverb. So like super interesting, like the way that it processes sound, which is I think why this is probably one of the best free reverb plugins of 2020. Like let's see how I've got a basic preset on here, how this affects Lost Saucer, right? This is under their medium room. Yeah, Lost Saucer, which that was also a little confusing, like the way that they base their sizes, because some of their reverbs in like medium don't seem like they're medium reverbs. And then, you know, so that was a little unusual. So we have Lost Saucer. Well, that's kind of more like a long verb, but it's what they labeled. So I was kind of playing around with that. I mean, they've got some really unique, you know, Lunar Lander. Can't really hear it as much on there, but if we put it on snare, we can cycle through. Like that's a really weird snare sound, and it's considered like a verb, but you know, it's more of like a delay reverb hybrid. So that would be kind of what I would use something like this free verb for on, you know, sound design for like transition work, or just designing my own sample packs, trying to come up with something a little more unique for a particular snare sound. This is a super useful plugin for that if you're just trying to like get some weird sounds, because sometimes it can be like, you definitely get weird sounds out of these like basic reverbs, but sometimes it can be a little tricky. So having you know, a plugin that kind of already does some of that work for you is really nice. Now I have down here piano. Typically pianos I'm mostly using to just kind of like fill in the sound. But I've always struggled with kind of making the Giant from Native Instruments to sound great. This is what it sounds like dry. It's a little, I mean, there's a little bit of space in there. I think this is like, that's basically no reverb, right? And typically I would toss on like this, right? Like this is just the basic. It's really nice, you know? Just gentle, right? But what's cool is like Valhalla with this really fills it and makes it sound really lush and warm. Like this would be a really fantastic kind of like ballad sound, you know? And then I wanted to show you ROM. ROM is a free Native Instruments plugin. That's why I think like, or it was a free Native Instruments plugin. I think they gave it out around Christmas time. Sign up for the Native Instruments newsletter because usually Christmas time they give away something free, some sort of free plugin. I think a couple of years ago it was like Reptilia or Replica. It was like a delay verb. They released like a free contact instrument. It was like toys or something like that. And then they released ROM, which was part of this like, with one of their, it's like ROM, Dirt, Grit. There's a couple of them. And it's got some really nice sounds, right? Like check this out. Right, like super nice sound. That's ROM. It's not free anymore, but you know that's why keep your eyes out for free plugins. And a big reason why I like the Valhalla plugins is just their price. They're super inexpensive. Like their normal plugins, it's like $50. You go to their website, Supermassive Valhalla. And what's cool about Valhalla is, like, as I was saying, free. It's right here. You can go ahead and download it. They have other stuff like Space Modulator, free. Some of the stuff, though, keep in mind, you do have to buy something for it to be free. I forget which one. I think it was this one, Space Modulator, or maybe it was Valhalla Frequency Echo. These are their free things. I don't think Supermassive required you to make any purchases, but one of these did. But honestly, look at how much they charge, right? Like, boom, $50 for all of their plugins. And they're solid, good sounding plugins. I mean, I like FabFilter, but FabFilter, you look at their Pro R, right? Which, I mean, it's a really good plugin, but it's expensive, if I remember right. I think, I think if you got the Pro R, you're looking at $200. And I also like the Universal Audio. Right? If you go to Universal Audio over here and you look at their plugins. Now, granted, Universal Audio is great because they've got unison mode on their interfaces, so you can put a reverb or some sort of reverb on the interface itself, and then when the vocalist is in the booth, they can hear reverb on them, and then you can make the adjustments later because some artists would want that, and if some artists will want like it to sound good, so you want to try to get a good sounding reverb. But like their reverb plugins, I mean, granted they often offer deals, but if I remember right, let's see if I can find their reverbs. You're looking at 174, 74, which I guess that's not as bad. And Pure Plate, I think, is a pretty decent reverb. But I mean, I think I got EMT, I guess 99. But I mean, typically the prices are like $200. I mean, this one is $349. I mean, come on. In comparison, you've got Valhalla for $50. So, listen, to each their own. I think each reverb has its uses, but don't sleep on this one, at least for something to have in your arsenal to play around with, especially if you're in the sound design space or you're making more unique music and you want kind of a unique sound and tone. Valhalla's Supermassive is great. So, hope this was really helpful, and we'll see you on the flip side. Peace.